thank you, Elio, for sharing all that with us. So up next, we have Cristina Fonseca. She's a partner at Indico, and she's going to give us a masterclass on something that I think is really useful, 6 capital sins of startups. The floor is yours, Cristina. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So I'm going to sit comfortably because I want to make this more of a conversation. And my plan for today is to cover the most common mistakes we see founders making going through fundraising and pitching startups to investors. So as an intro, I'm Cristina Fonseca. I am one of the partners at Indico Capital Partners. Indico is a VC fund based in Lisbon, Portugal. We invest in what I like to call the most promising startups coming out of the Portuguese ecosystem or that are somehow related to Portugal. That includes Portuguese founders that went abroad. I also co-founded 2 other companies. One was TalkDesk, which you probably know. It's a very well-known success story coming out of Portugal. And I also co-founded an AI company that I sold to Zendesk almost 3 years ago. So like, one went big, one was smaller, but very deep tech that went through an acquisition, which gives me a very interesting perspective of what are the right things and the wrong things. So first of all, and mainly in the last 10 years, because there was really a lot of money in the market, some founders got this impression that money could solve a lot of things. And fake it until you make it can only get you so far. One of the reasons why we were super successful at TalkDesk was because since the beginning, we focused on the product, which means, am I solving something that people will pay for me to solve? Do I have a product that's meaningful? I think actually the best way to get the right startup idea is to go around and ask people, what would you pay for me to solve? And that includes making a little bit like, can be napkin calculations, but the numbers and the business model needs to make sense. I need to understand how much is the client going to pay for my product? Is that enough for me to create a business? Am I going to spend more money to deliver this than customers are going to pay me? And then you really need, like these days, creating a company 10 years ago was a little easier, I would say, because if you had a very good tech, but the UX was okay-ish, you would still make it. Right now, you need to excel at every single area in order for people to adopt your product, which puts the bar a little higher, but still, product should be the #1 thing you focus on. If you get the right product, if you get customers to use your product and to love your product, investors will come after you. It's that simple. If you ignore this, you can fake it for a while, but eventually, it's going to bite you, and you're going to struggle, because there's a little bit of a shaky ground that you will have to fix. Some companies can fix this later. Some other companies can't, and then they go wrong. So by the way, I'm going to open the floor for questions at the end. So I'm going to try to go through the points, and then I think we can have a little bit more of a discussion. So don't be shy. #2, hire a great team. This is like commonplaces. But related to this, the most important lesson I have to share is in regards to how quickly you need to fix your mistakes. There's no way a founder will do everything right, especially if it's the first time you're building a company. Let's just not assume we wake up every day and we do everything right. That doesn't happen. It's not reality. The most successful founders are the ones that can fix their mistakes faster. And be realistic with yourself. If I hired the wrong person, but I just assume, well, I made a mistake, I'm going to fix it as quickly as I can, you will progress faster than your competition. If you just like, pretend that's not a problem, or try to delay things, or you are in denial, then the problem just gets bigger. So hiring very, very good team members. Another important point related to this is when we found the company, it's our baby. We are typically the visionaries. We believe we know everything. We know exactly what, like, we have a vision for that company. But as a founder, your role is to hire great people to do all of the functions that you need to take care of within a startup. Like in Talkdesk, the best way to summarize my role was every 6 months, I had to replace myself. First, you start coding. Then you hire developers. Then you do design. It's not really design because I'm not a designer, but developers used to say, oh, Cristina, come put some makeup here. And then I hired like professional people to do it. I would do accounting. Like, what do I know about accounting? So your job becomes every 6 months, you need to replace yourself in all of these functions in order to have a real company and a professional type company. If you don't hire people that can do all of this better than you, that's a problem, because you're not really an expert, and you're not supposed to be an expert. Your job as a founder is to empower the people around you, give them direction, and make sure they are top. Again, we don't do it right all at once, so if you make a mistake, just fix it and move on. I could tell you a million stories, like, especially at Talkdesk, when we started, it was me, Tiago, and then we hired Raul, which became our CTO, and then we raised a round of funding, and we hired 3 people all at once. We had so much to do, and they were the wrong ones, and we realized quickly. So then we had to fire 3 people, the first 3 that we hired, which was very painful. But we did that quickly enough not to really damage what we were doing. The first time we hired a VP of sales, and this was in the US, it was someone recommended by our investors. It was something that was planned as part of a round. So we raised this big round in the US to conquer the US market, to go big, to open an office. We hired the VP of sales, and it was the wrong person. But it helped us take that step. And then we went to find the right one. So companies don't do everything right at once. And usually, I mean, you go through different phases of the company, so you need to hire different people for the different phases. But don't get stuck by your actions and think if you are solving a problem in a different way, that requires a little bit of creativity and change. And as founders, you need to be the first ones to change through the journey. This should be obvious, but I even had, am I going to write this on a slide? Do not lie. But I think there's a difference between the fake it until you make it and reporting the wrong thing to your investors or to investors you are pitching to. Like metrics, you will get into due diligence and people will be not very impressed if you tweak the story too much. There's a difference between telling the story in an ambitious way and lying and getting the numbers that are wrong or reporting MRR in the wrong way. These things have a definition that's very well documented. It's all over the internet. Don't invent your metrics to make your company look better. Then on fundraising, look, this is a very hard one for founders to understand. Because if you are selling a percentage of your company, by definition, you want to get the best price, right? You want to sell the minimum possible by the highest amount of money. But the valuation that investors give to your company is based on a framework. Let me give you an example. Every time you see a company announcing a round, you go on TechCrunch, company X raised seed, Series A, Series B, it doesn't matter. On average, these companies dilute between, they sell 10 to 30% of their company at each stage. This is, like, the average is 20%, so you can assume, okay, I'm going to raise a round, I'm going to sell 20% of my company, investors are going to give me, like, this money in return. But of course, founders come to us and say, oh, I want to be on the 10% side. I want to raise a round, I'm only going to give you 10%, you give me the same money. Like, each founder believes they are they are the best of the best. What's the problem with this? Usually, the valuation is a consequence of where you are in terms of revenue, where you are in terms of proving how your product solves a problem, how your customers care about your product, how fast you are selling, how quickly you are growing. If you are multiplying revenue by 3 every year and just growing this fast, investors are okay with, like, giving you a higher valuation because you are catching up to that valuation faster. If you are growing 50% a year, I might still believe, like, when I invest, I might say, okay, there's huge potential, I'm going to pay more than everyone, I'm going to believe this is going to be the best company on earth, and I'm going to pay a high price. Before you raise the next round, you need to justify that price. So you need to grow 3x, 4x. You need to catch up to the valuation someone gave you. Sometimes this gap is big. Some companies get there, some other companies don't get there. Our fundraising story at TalkDesk was very privileged. First, because we had a very good product, and investors came to us, and they wanted to give us money. And then we were growing super fast. And our Series A, we did a Series A at a valuation that was very good. And of course, we just wanted the best price. Let's raise, like, the money we can at the best possible price. And then after that, we had to justify that valuation before going out and raising more money. We were fortunate that we were growing and that the business was going well. But we had to wait 3 years until we grew into that valuation to justify the next fundraising. Because if we would go out and try to raise money, the price of the last round was just too high. It was hard for an investor to come after that and pay more. So usually, I mean, founders optimize a lot for valuation, but if you raise at the wrong terms, you might be compromising the next round, and if you run out of money in that window, you might be in trouble. So think what's fair and what's market standard for where you are. Especially these days, I mean, like in the last decade was hot and interesting for investors in startups. But right now, if we are talking about software as a service, a 10x multiple on revenue is the standard. So if you are making 1 million per year, 10 million valuation is very good already. Like, this is good. Some companies might push it to 12, 15, 20, fine. Investors might be willing to pay, but just note that what you're doing is like just putting the bar higher for you, because then you need to deliver on those promises. Another important thing, and again, I'm giving you examples from TalkDesk because I think it's just more credible than me telling you like all the theory. When you get an investor to invest in your company, it's not just about the money. It's mainly about the help you're going to get. And help can come in different forms. More capital in the future. It's very important to understand if an investor invests in you, do they have more money to keep funding me and helping me in the subsequent rounds? And you can ask that, and you should ask that. Another one is network. are these people going to help me hire the critical roles that are maybe outside of my domain? Like, for example, if I'm hiring in sales or in marketing, and I'm an engineer, can these people help me open my network and reach out to people in these areas that I don't know about? When I'm ready to raise a subsequent round and go international, can these investors help me get there? Are there other portfolio companies they have that have done this journey that I can and I can use that to understand if this is the right investor to back me or not? So capital is not all the same. So make sure, again, and this tied with the valuation, sometimes founders just choose the best price. But the best price might not be the best long-term in order to get your business to succeed. Number 6, this is a little bit selfish, but being a fund and coming from a decade where founders have a lot of power, like, we ask real people for money in order to put in your startups. So we should keep a level of respect for the entire ecosystem. Like, the money companies spend on a day-to-day basis, that money comes from somewhere. And usually it's either companies, big institutions, like normal people that want to fund innovation. So respect this entire ecosystem. I don't believe like this money comes from the skies, because that's not true. It's actually way harder to raise for a fund compared to raising for a company. Because a company you control, it's like, look, these are my metrics. It's good or not good. A fund is a little bit more less tangible. Hey, give me money and I'm going to invest in the most promising companies. Okay, what does that mean for real? So respect the ecosystem. And then last one, this is a little bit of a bonus. All of this and all the decisions you make, you need to think to really solve a problem. It's a 10-year journey. And like, respect your investors, work with them, assume they are a partner in this journey. Like, if you ignore some problems that exist, namely on the product side, in terms of team, you're compromising a 10-year journey. It's not just a decision you make that affects you today. So you need to think about the long term a lot, like fundraising and rounds. Do not optimize for just this round. Try to understand what makes sense in the grand scheme of things. So really, it's 10 years. It's hard. Build relationships and make sure you make the best decision with the information you have, but think about the long term as well. So I can talk about like these for hours, but I think it's much more interesting if you ask me questions. So I'll open the floor. Okay, goes well.
Fake it until you make it, because in a way you kind of, super play the UX for the experience for the user, even if on the back end you're doing a bunch of...
There's a mic there. I think like maybe it's easier for you to continue. I'm listening, but so everyone can...
This one is working, Michael. But, because in the end, at the back end, you're kind of faking it for speed purpose, test the reaction of the market, and then fully develop it or not, right? So I don't think I have a specific question on that. I would just like to hear your thoughts on, how do you, or how did you in your career manage that approach to the world?
Very, very good question. Because I don't think testing product with customers early falls in the category of like faking it. I believe when a founder has an idea, the best way for you to make it real is to start talking about it. Build a 5 slides deck use that to go out and start talking about things, even if you don't have a line of code. Like, I think that's the best way to validate. That's way better than spending 5 or 6 months in the cave, building a tech platform you don't know what's for. So I'm a big fan of simplifying things as much as possible, and go out, talk about them, see if customers will buy what you have, and then, okay, like, you figure out the rest. Or try to understand, can I do this manually first? And then, okay, I automate, because I know exactly how to build the right product because I've validated. For Cleverly, and I already had a very good reputation. Like, it was easier because people somehow knew me, so it was a little easier to knock on doors. But that's what I did. Like, I built a simple deck. I was prototyping the technology, but I didn't have a fully ready product to sell before I started pitching and trying to sell what I had. I didn't tell people that was entirely built. Like, I didn't do that. But I went out and spoke with companies that became my customers eventually, selling them the dream and validating the product. I spoke with other people within my network to validate that. I started telling my friends I was doing that. Those were the ones like, yeah, sure. Like, you came from this big company, you're like playing the startup game again. But until you start talking about this, it doesn't become real. So as soon as possible, just get out there. You will learn a lot. It's not faking it. I think it's doing it right. I think that's better than, like, you go for 6 months and you build something that only exists in your mind.
Yeah.
That's such a risk.
Agreed. Thank you.
Hey, I think that in this room and in the whole event, there's a lot of innovators that are not founders. And I think we tend to romanticize a bit the life of a founder, and nowadays, because this is such a popular topic, a lot of people in Portugal, and we have so many unicorns, and it's such an interesting and vibing ecosystem that a lot of us think about that option. And I'd like to hear your thoughts about what makes a great founder? What kind of skills of profile does a founder need to have? Is it a coder? Is it a commercial person that then can go ahead and sell his business or her business to anyone? What do you think makes a good founder, and who should consider becoming a founder?
Okay. So the question is, what makes a good founder, and who are the people that should eventually become a founder? So I sense you have that appetite, but number one, start with a problem. Like, find a problem that's worth solving. To me, the founders that impress me the most are not the ones that come from a particular background, because you can be in tech, you can be in business, you can be in marketing, it doesn't matter. The important thing is, when you start a project and it's about tech, at least make sure you have someone in the founding team that understands tech. Like, it's super important. But also, if it's just only researchers and they have amazing tech and they don't know how to place that tech in the market and which problem it solves, that's also a problem. So the founding team needs to have a little bit of a balance. It's not that a person needs to come from tech and another one from business, but at least in terms of mindset, people need to be open and need to understand it's not only tech, it's not only business. The founders that impress me the most are the ones that can show quick progress. We have startups pitching to us every day saying they are changing the world. It's very hard for an investor to assess what's reality, because it's not like belief will not be enough. So for us, it's about seeing progress. And usually, when you pitch an investor like me, I have 3 or 4 questions, and I'm always very transparent. Look, I have doubts in regards to this. I don't know if the market is big enough. I don't know if customers are going to pay like a number that makes sense in the grand scheme of things. But if a founder 1, 2, 3 months later comes to me and has an answer to all my questions and went and tried to learn and progressed, like, I'm going to be impressed. So I think the right founders are the ones that are found a problem that's relevant to solve and can navigate and iterate and listen to the market versus, I have this grand vision, I'm going to build this thing. Like, that usually doesn't work. So good luck.
Hi, Cristina. My question is a little bit about, I want to know your opinion when things kind of go wrong, or you have an idea, the market is not big enough, or the customer is not paying for something that can value the company as you wished for. So when do you know when to pivot? Do you pivot? And if you do you try to, for example, build over the work that you did in the previous months? So if you have, for example, a very horizontal tech stack, do you use that to build another product on the maybe the same segment? I know, I want to hear a little bit on your opinion about pivoting.
Okay, so the question is about when do you pivot if you realize like you're not...
Yeah, and about what strategies do you think are good for pivoting?
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, I think one of the reasons for you to start small and really try to figure out the product at first is because it's way easier to pivot with a small team rather than you had this big dream, you raised a lot of money, you built a big team, and then you realize, we have a problem. It becomes way harder for you to say, well, now we need to go in that direction. So I think the smaller you are during this validation phase, the easier it is for you to just like go in another direction. For example, before Talkdesk, me and Tiago spent 1 year trying different ideas. And first of all, no one gave a shit about entrepreneurs or what we were doing. So we just had to be realistic with ourselves. Look, we thought this was cool. It's not working. It doesn't seem it's ever going to work. Let's try something else. So if you do this with a smaller team, it's easier. I think you also need to be comfortable with telling this to people around you. If you raise money, just be very honest with your investors. Like, I prefer when a company comes to me and says, I don't think this is working, I need help, to figure out next steps, rather than trying to pretend everything is awesome because that was your pitch 5 months ago, and now you wake up and you're like, I don't think this is working. Strategies, it depends. I think you can try to apply the technology to another sector. You can try to solve a completely different problem. I think it's just following the same process of trying to understand, can I build something that I'm motivated? Can I find a problem within this space, a space that's close enough? Can I ask my customers which problems they have that they would pay for me to solve? I think it's just like normal navigation. There's no recipe. It's hard, it's very hard, but it becomes easier if the team is small enough and you are comfortable being painful. That's painful, but you're comfortable being honest with yourself and just, okay, this is not working. But also do not confuse that with the entrepreneurship journey is hard. It takes a while to solve a problem. Sales cycles are long. You sell to a company. The person that's there and it's the person that's going to buy is not going to get fired if they don't buy your solution next week. And you're like, well, clock is ticking. So don't confuse reading the right signals from the market with being impatient. Because also, if you don't give a little bit of time and go deep, it becomes very easy to say, well, sales cycles is 6 months, I'm going to go do something else. Which is also a very good lesson in terms of, in the early stage, even if your product is in B2B enterprise, can you start with companies that are a little bit smaller or more digital or are more impatient so you can test quickly? Like, I might want to sell to Microsoft, but that probably takes 2 years. Like, can I find an avenue to validate that problem with a smaller company so I don't need to wait 2 years, which is very risky, and if I do things wrong, I lose the window, I get out of money, and I'm going to die. So, like, short iteration cycles, find a path that can give you a shorter iteration cycle so you can learn. One last question, I think. Unless these people give you more time, I'm fine.
Hello. Thank you very much, first of all. My question is the following. When you're growing, you will be faced with the decision, should I keep this function internally, like marketing, HR, legal, and so on, or should I externalize it? And I would like to have some advice on how to choose to keep the function internally or
external. So the question is, how do you choose if you should keep a certain area internally or externally? So I think early stages, you should have internally what's core to your business, meaning platform development, product, all of that. Like, especially if you start a tech company, everything related to tech, that's the thing you should not outsource. Everything else, please outsource. Accounting, even hiring, recruiting. At Talkdesk, maybe we hired the first person in HR when we were like 25, 30 people. We would buy every single service that was not core. That included even telephony, and Talkdesk was about like call centers, but like the telephony infrastructure piece is like, it's built, we are going to buy this. We are going to validate if the software as a service model and the call center model works. Like, that's what we wanted to prove. We didn't want to get distracted by all of the other functions. Eventually, like, it will make sense for you to bring them internally, build yourself, have people, but ask yourself, what is it that I'm trying to prove? Focus on that. Everything else, you outsource. And then you reassess as the company becomes bigger. This is my recipe, like, always. Like branding. People, just pay an agency. Like, all of these things. Yeah. Okay.